going live,
But-
Jake. I
okay.
think I'm doing it.
Okay.
I can see us. It says I'm live.
Well,
I feel-
it hasn't gone yet, but there
I
is
need a
always
nap.
that delay.
I need a nap.
Who's Anita?
I need a new light for my background. It's dark.
There we
day.
go. We're live.
We're live, yay! Boys and girls, can I please,
need
boys
to
and girls
brush
watching at
my
home,
hair.
can I please tell you the patience that Jake has exhibited getting to this point as we work together to get to this point. And Jake, I am going to turn my camera off on Skype because I'm just going to try and limit the number of distractions you get from looking at my pretty face. I'm just exhausted, Jake. I'm tired already because I've tried for months to get to this point where we have a few people watching on YouTube and on Facebook. So, 6 minutes and 16 seconds of riveting.
Turned off the YouTube stream,
Okay.
so I don't know if it's still going. I assume it is.
Look, I do have some behind the scenes stuff here. I've got like a screen that shows us doing something. Anyway, I'm exhausted. I'm so happy. I feel like crying. I'm so happy.
Well, you just look. Everyone deserves a cry now and again.
Dear me. All right. Anyway, okay. So, welcome to the pouch.
Congratulations.
Thanks, Jake.
It was
Yeah,
very
no,
good.
you. It was all you. Look, I have no
None of
idea
it was me.
what I was doing. Okay. Anyway, we have 2 viewers, and I'm happy with that. One of them's probably still me doing something somewhere. Anyway, well, I'm going to leave myself on there just so I feel good about the fact we've got 2 viewers. Welcome to the Pouch Podcast. We are an Australian. We are an Australian podcast that deals with Australian news and politics.
I mean, usually not so seriously. Potentially not today.
Today's a little bit of a serious one. We're going to hit record, Jake, on our respective recorders.
You say
Are
when.
you ready? 3, 2, 1. Beautiful.
Also,
Beautiful.
didn't time that well. Do you want to do that one more time?
Yeah, of course.
I was in a different program.
Were you?
All right, let's do it again.
Okay, hang on. I just need to stop now and delete this one. I can see why people hire other people to do this.
Yes.
Okay, 3, 2, 1. All right.
In the highly profitable industry of podcasting.
Yes, I know, right? Like
I did see Joe Rogan is making something like $20 or $30 billion.
Yeah, I mean he's quite good at what he does.
Well,
I think he gets his. I think he has a producer who does this sort of stuff for him. But anyway, look, I'm very excited, Jake. This is an exciting episode for us. It's been an absolutely huge week, and we're going to start off by recording our skit, right? And the fun part this week for my brain has been to try to figure out how to write a skit about being offended without being offensive. So this is what we've come up with, and we're going to give it a go. Have you got the script in front of you there, my friend?
I do.
Okay, now if you have any comments
Also,
or questions about Australian politics, about Australia in general, heck, just type them in a YouTube comment, type them in a Facebook comment. We can bring them up on the screen. You can, and we can discuss them in depth, Jake, because that's what we do.
It'll be great. We will shove some knowledge down your throats.
Yes, absolutely.
Unless we don't know it, in which case we will shove our ignorance down your throat.
Either way, you will get something shoved down your throat. Which is
what a great place to start a podcast.
Yes, especially considering we're not meant to be being offensive. All right. Okay, you ready to go?
Relatively,
I've got to do
yes.
this. Jake wants me to do this. There we go.
Yeah, but I can't see. I've lost the effect.
Okay. All right, Jake. Well, I'm ready to start playing my new game.
My own personal gratification, and I have no ability to be gratified by it.
No, fair enough. All right, one day we'll both have the NBN, and it'll be a wonderful day. All right, Jake. I'm ready to start playing my new game with you. It's called Have You Ever Been Offended?
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Fair enough.
I mean, look, the rules are pretty simple. I say something offensive to you, you say something offensive to me, and we kind of go back and forth until one of us is forced to apologise.
Well, Greg, it's just I'm really not sure that we should be making light of people getting offended. It is a little dismissive of the fact that offense in general is a genuine emotion that can be used as, for example, a non-violent means to decide where we should head as a society.
Right. Well, that's a bit of a shame because I was up all night and, well, I was writing what I thought were hilarious jokes about the fact that, and that academics are, and that even koalas are.
Greg, I think you might have just completely, totally, and utterly proved my point.
You don't like my idea.
Look, it's not that I don't like it. It's just we need to flesh it out a little more, as it's possible that we're just masking our own personal ignorance and inaction behind a veneer of what we think is funny, when in reality, deliberately causing offense might not be as clever as we think it is.
I knew it, Jake. You don't think my idea is good. You never think any of my idea is good. It's like, I spent all night writing jokes about how, and that 5G conspiracy theorists are, and that Scott Morrison and Anthony Albanese should.
Greg, I'm sorry.
I win. Not only did you apologize, but I get bonus points for making you say it sincerely as well. Good game, man. Good game.
You really got me there, Greg.
I know, right? Anyway, what sort of hippie uses the word veneer?
Me, actually. It's absolutely in my lexicon.
Dude.
Hey, one thing that you didn't say in the opening part of that was the whole point of me having, or somebody, the first person to say sorry.
No, I said that.
So the rules are pretty simple. I say something offensive to you, you say something offensive to me, we go back. Oh, until one of us is forced to apologize. You're right.
I am right.
You're right.
Hence,
you're right.
And enter the theme of the podcast. Greg is right.
Yes.
All right. Look, we are the Patch the Podcast. We deal with Australian news and politics.
Not so seriously.
And this is a live recording of our episode 31. We've decided to go live on both Facebook and YouTube. So a lot of this doesn't actually make it to the original podcast. What we do is we edit this out. We edit a lot of this audio out from the original podcast, so you can subscribe to us on Apple Podcasts, on Spotify. You can also head to the patchthepodcast.com where you can choose your favorite podcast player of choice. Jake.
Greg, you are saying a lot of purrs.
Is it popping? Is it?
It's popping a little bit.
I shouldn't have.
I'd just say.
I'll sit back.
I just say, just
sit back.
go back. Just go back a little bit.
Yeah.
Just chill, Greg. Just chill.
I just feel like
it's perfect.
Is it?
No, it's all good except for the pers and the ters.
Yeah, that's right. We're very professional.
Mind your P's and T's, Greg.
I am. I'm minding them, Jake. Don't you mind? Don't you mind my P's and T's for me? Now, Aaron Smith loved the idea. Let's bring that up. He loves it. He loves the idea of an offensive
Thank you, Aaron.
I think he'd be good at it.
Yeah, well,
don't type anything offensive.
If it's the Aaron Smith that I know, absolutely.
All right, we're going to get to the actual recording of the podcast.
Is it the Aaron Smith that I know?
It is the Aaron Smith you know. Jake.
Now, speaking of which, Greg,
it is.
Should we go to? Well, should we now close this track and open a new one for the main show, or do you want to keep recording on this track?
Oh, look, just keep recording on this track, Jake. Let's just plow through.
Okay.
Because that's what we do.
Okay, let's plow through. Right. By the way, if it is the Aaron Smith that I know, we are plowers. We're plowers, not towers. Yeah, yes, exactly. Well said.
We're werewolves,
if it is the Aaron Smith that I know,
werewolves, not swearwolves.
I love that so much.
Well, that's from We Live in the Shadows, the New Zealand film. Anyway, What We Do in the Shadows, something like that. Anyway,
it is.
Yeah.
It is. Yeah, sorry. If it is the Aaron Smith that I know, he'll be wearing a Star Wars costume, a shock trooper.
I think he is. I think he is wearing that. A tiara. I thought you were going to say a tiara. Anyway.
A tiara.
Okay. All right. Hello and welcome to The Pouch, the slippery veranda of podcasts that aims to help the average Aussie try and make sense of their current news and political environment. I'm Greg. Chris Lilly was banned from my life years ago. Savage.
And I'm Jake. I get my lustrous tan from working near a 5G tower far Wharton. On today's episode, we talk Northerners, Southerners, and everything else in between.
Yes, and Jake, while we're snug as a bug in this proverbial rug, I want to know, what's your proposal for renaming Mount Disappointment?
Spoiler alert, it should be renamed Mount Found the Kid.
I don't know why 5G has copped it so much in our little intro today. They copped it in our skit and they copped it in the intro.
You had a spoiler alert joke and I can't find it.
Well, that's it. The Mount Disappointment one. You did it.
Oh, okay. Oh,
yeah.
good.
Yeah, you pulled it off.
Oh, good. It was off the cuff. I'm glad. I thought you had a retort to it as well.
Well, I was just glad you knew what I was talking about because basically that's been my whole week has been every time it comes up. Every time it comes up on the ticker on the news, I'm just like, it's named Mount Disappointment. I bet you he was disappointed to be on Mount Disappointment. Anyway, very witty.
Very witty indeed. Yes. Can I just say,
yes.
Completely agree with your summation of Chris Lilly.
Yeah. Look, I've never found him funny. I've never watched one of his shows and laughed.
I did find one of his characters funny, and it was a granny that was going to roll a certain distance. You know, instead of like doing a walkathon or a shave your head or whatever it was. She was going to roll a certain distance. It was like marathon distance or something like that.
Right. The roller. Yeah. I remember that. The Guinness Book of Records one. Yeah.
Yeah, that's the one. Yeah.
Yeah,
and
look,
that was pretty funny.
I kind of got it. Like I got the humor and I got the idea behind it. I just didn't. Yeah, Chris Lilly for me just never did it for me. It's the same as Tim Minchin. Yeah. I don't find Tim Minchin very funny. There, I said it out loud on an Australian podcast. Come on the show, Tim.
I do disagree. I do disagree with that one. I do find him very, very witty in his songs, and I do love a good comedy song.
Yeah,
we had a crack at a few of those in the past as well.
Yeah, and they weren't very funny.
I suppose ours less successful.
I'm just willing to admit that I'm not very funny. You know, I'm not trying to make a living out of this. You know, I've got a good job. We have a lot to talk about today, Jay, and we're going to take a different approach today. We're going to take the approach of
lots of bad news.
Yes, there's been lots of bad news, and it's depressing, right? So we tried to think during the week about what we could do to make it a bit more lighthearted, without trying to be offensive and without trying to make fun of people or anything like that. So we've gone for a bit of a game show theme this week. We blame Johnny the producer. For this ridiculous idea.
Thanks,
but, you know,
Johnny.
Because he's the
Classic
producer.
Johnny, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
We've got to go through with it because that's what we pay him for. So the idea behind today's show will be that we sort of play a bit of a game before we get to the news. Is that right? Is that the order we're doing it in?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay. Okay.
I think so. Let's. I think we give it a crack and see whether it does end up truckle-worthy.
Any good? Look,
exactly.
Do you want to start, Jake, or do you want me to start? What do you want to do?
I reckon you start, and that way we can get, because if you start further down the list of news stories,
sure,
and then we just sort of we might just screw the order or skew the order rather, is what I meant to say.
No.
And
what is
and that way, so if you do 6, I reckon 6 was a good one. 6. I've
got the games, Jake, but I don't have the numbers here. I don't know which one it is. I've got. Is that
so that's the Greg to play Sad Libs with Jake.
Yeah. So this is called Sad Libs to avoid being sued by Mad Libs. Do you think they'll go for it?
I think that They don't have any claim over it.
So the idea behind
Everybody
this is that
does Mad Libs.
Okay, well,
everybody.
Here's the idea, right? That there was a news story, and I've changed, and I've gone through and I've added in where there's a plural noun or an event or a large number, and Jake has to replace those for me. So Jake, I'm going to basically give you something to give me. So I say, can you name a plural noun? And you have to say something like sheep or sheeps or fishes,
yeah,
or dogs, right? I've got a plural noun, an event, a large number, an adjective, a noun, a collective noun, an event, and a time of the week. So hopefully it should be nice and easy. So what's your plural noun?
Murder bees.
Right. Murder bees.
Oh, sorry, I meant murder hornets.
Murder hornets. Oh, yeah. I know what you're talking about. Murder hornets. An event.
Gay pride.
Okay. Thanks, Jake. A large number.
Did I just make things very difficult?
Look,
in the outcome,
maybe large number.
All right.
Yep.
723,943.
943. So you thought you tricked me, but I'm a school teacher, Jake. I was able to write that like nothing else. An adjective.
Jumping.
That's not an adjective, Jake. That's a verb.
Isn't it?
Yeah.
Oh, yes. Fast.
A noun.
Greg.
That's. Can we just make it like a common noun, not a proper noun?
Okay. Town. Does that work?
Yeah. Why not? A collective noun. So like, a murder of crows or something. What?
Yeah. This would have been so much more fun had I researched what is a collective noun beforehand. No, let's say Jake's. No, let's say.
I didn't even write it down. I'm just staring at it with disappointment.
Trumps. No. Rallies. No. What am I thinking?
I'm just thinking like an animal, Jake, like a murder of crows or a.
Okay.
Well, you've already said murder hornet.
How about a school of fish?
Yes, school of fish. Perfect.
There we go. Oh, far out. That was.
Okay.
Looking forward to see how this comes out of the editing.
An event. One more event. The first one was gay pride.
Okay. So let's go with the Gimpy muster.
Good one. And a time of the week.
Friday. A time of the week.
Yeah, Friday,
midday.
No, that's
Friday
that's
midday.
Time of the day. That's Friday midday. Righto. I'll put it in. See how it works. Okay, here we go. You ready? Murder hornets will be free to go to gay pride events with up to 723,943 spectators next month in a fast step to remove town restrictions as schools of fish warn against holding major gimpy musters planned for this Friday at midday. Go. Discuss.
It worked so well. It worked so well.
All right, Jake. Well, the real one is that Australians will be free to go to outdoor events with up to 10,000 spectators next month in a big step to remove pandemic restrictions as federal and state leaders warn against holding major protests planned for this weekend, which, because we're actually up to date today, Jake, they've gone ahead, haven't they?
Well, they have, and in several states across Australia, states and territories, I should say, yes. So this story relates to Scott Morrison earlier on this week meeting up with the premiers for the National Cabinet and discussing the further sort of the final lots of restrictions easing, particularly around the timetable for COVID-19 restrictions, including things like opening of the borders, looked at physical distancing rules for indoor gatherings and the potential of flights, both internally within Australia and within the, what are we calling it? The travel bubble.
Yeah, the travel bubble. The Trans-Tasman travel bubble.
New Zealand. And Yes, the Trans-Tasman travel bubble. But yes, Australia's leaders have also agreed, as you said, to enable mass gatherings of sporting fans of up to 10,000 people to attend upcoming sporting games,
Yes.
with the caveat, of course, that the stadiums abide by social distancing regulations. And they're going to do things like open all of the gates. You might recall if you've ever been to a sporting match,
Oh, I
they
have.
normally have one or two entries, and then everything opens up for the exits. So they're going to essentially open up all of the exits and entries
Yeah.
as entry points to enable physical distancing. So yes. It is interesting because, of course, shortly after this meeting where they found essentially that 10,000 people in an outdoor event would be okay, Prime Minister Scott Morrison reiterated his calls for people to not attend Black Lives Matter protests this weekend,
Yes.
after essentially yesterday saying that those who do should be charged with breaching coronavirus guidelines. And of
Yes.
course, this comes as New South Wales police say that they will not hesitate to prosecute those who attend the Sydney protests, citing significant COVID-19 health and safety concerns.
Yeah.
So we do have this interesting case of double or potentially triple standards, just in that in that statement. But yes, the triple standards relating to what the PM said, what the Prime Minister said about the anti-lockdown, the 5G, anti-vaccine, pick your cause protests, which the PM said, in reference to those protests, he said, "quote It's a free country." So it's a very interesting case here.
Yeah.
I don't want to point too many fingers, but while we're pointing fingers, there's one. It's just a very interesting case of saying it's okay to have mass gatherings, but not those mass gatherings. But also, on the other hand, when we had those mass gatherings, they were okay.
Well, I think if we pick that apart a little bit, let's go back, right? Let's do the wavy, dreamy, going back in time thing, right? To when the Prime Minister
1976. Let's do it.
When people were putting their hip to the wheel, Jake. We had
a shoulder to the grindstone.
That's it. We had the Scott Morrison said that we're going to be banning these outdoor events, and then he said that he was going to the footy on the weekend. Now, in my view, that was okay because mass events hadn't been cancelled yet, so he wasn't doing anything wrong. He said it comes in on Monday. I'm going to the footy on Sunday or whatever it was. So why not, right? That to me was okay. He wasn't breaking any of his own guidelines. 5G protests. What were there? Like 4 of them?
No, there was a few thousand people. There was a few thousand people, particularly at the Victoria.
Thousands of people in Australia protesting.
I believe there was 1,000 people at the Victoria.
Let's get Johnny to check that. Maybe Rachel or Fred could check that for it. What's the number? How many people were at those protests? Okay, so I imagine he thought there was probably going to be 4 anyway, because that's how many people I presume are against 5G in Australia. So then you've got this idea that that he shouldn't be saying that the footy can go back, but protests are banned. Protests are banned this weekend. Footy is banned this weekend. You can't.
Yes.
You can't. Footy's not going back this weekend, and protests are banned. Protests are banned this weekend. Footy is banned this weekend. So all of that makes sense to me. He's not. There's no hypocrisy there from my perspective, and also, it's not him. It's the cabinet who is they're a group of Labor politicians, Liberal politicians. They're all the MPs. It's.
But I would say there are a few. Well, there are a few MPs. So the states where it has been, where the Black Lives Matter protests have been banned are New South Wales. I think Victoria was a little bit iffy about it this weekend after one of the protesters turned up positive for COVID-19, and there began a very fraught chance to really try and find a way to contact trace in such a a situation. But anyway, yeah, look, I do generally speaking agree with you. I think when you think about it, as we discussed, like the protests are generally context and situation specific.
Yeah.
So while it is certainly true to say, the people who are protesting protesting for the Black Lives Matter movement, and protesting against the treatment of Indigenous Australians in custody, and the et cetera, all of the things that we discussed on last week's show. While I think certainly they could move it to next week. I think if you do that, then you do look. This is sort of protest 101. You capitalize on a situation. There is a groundswell.
The timing is here, isn't
exactly.
it? I mean, we're talking about it now. It's all in the news now.
Exactly.
They're caught between a rock and a hard
place.
Exactly. Yeah.
Broadly speaking, the COVID situation is probably not going to be any better or worse next week. So by saying next week it's all going to be fine and we can go back to the footy, that's a little bit naive. Invariably, what they're doing is they're setting a timetable for that to open. They're enabling, stadiums, etc., to hire the necessary number of people in order to support the influx of people into the stadiums, etc. So by saying next for getting people back into footy, that's preparing an industry. Whereas for a protest, I mean, most of those things happen relatively spontaneously, or at least they can happen relatively spontaneously, so that there's not an enormous amount of planning that needs to happen. So, I mean, look, it's me saying I totally get what you're saying, and I broadly speaking agree with you that they're saying next week it's going to be fine. But given the attitude that has been I suppose, projected onto the Black Lives Matter protesters in general from our nation's leaders, there's probably a really good chance that if the protests were to be held next week as well, you'd probably see a relatively large amount of enmity being projected against them again.
Yeah. Well, like you said, they do. There is a case to be made that they have to capitalize on this situation. My understanding is that it's gone pretty peacefully. So people still met, but obviously it didn't turn too aggressive. There was nothing in the news there this morning about that. There was nothing in the news about any arrests from what I saw. But so hopefully everyone's in a really great spot at the moment to be able to get those messages across. With the goal, of course, being that there are some changes to the culture of the way that Indigenous people are treated in custody, because the statistics there aren't very pleasant read. All right, Jake.
Let's go on to story one.
Story one. Let's do it.
What do you think about that? That's me.
Yes. Take it away.
So. Greg?
Yes.
Greg?
Yes.
Which Australian state or territory
yes.
is almost double the size of Texas, but only has one member of parliament?
The Northern Territory.
Correct.
Well, the only reason I knew that is because aren't they rezoning it?
They are looking at it, actually. That is indeed the story of this story. That is the crux of this story. Yes. The Northern Territory might be double the geographical size of Texas. When it comes to parliamentary representation, the only size that matters is the size of its population. And for that reason, the Northern Territory's relatively small number of residents, approximately 245,000, are currently represented by just two members of parliament in federal parliament. Pardon me. But at the next federal election, that number is expected to dwindle to only one member of parliament, and that's unless the Electoral Act is changed to ensure that the Northern Territory retains its existing two seats.
Right.
So the territory's population has been going backwards at the same time that other jurisdictions have been growing, because generally speaking, the Australian population has not ballooned that statistically significantly. So really what we're doing is we're trading people between states and territories. So under the Electoral Act, a formula is used to determine how many that each state and territory is entitled to.
Yes.
And when the numbers are crunched next month, analysts expect the expect the Northern Territory to fall by 4,700 people. Fall 4,700 people short of the benchmark of 2 seats, and it will fall to approximately 1.4. So the Northern Territory's result in 2017 was 1.5, which was rounded up. Yes, the Darwin electorate of Solomon, held by Labor's Luke Gosling, and the vast regional seat of Lingiari, held by his Labor colleague Warren Snowden, could be merged into a single seat covering the entire NT, which would bring us back to 2001 times, when the Northern Territory's only seat was called the Northern Territory.
Oh, I was going to try and guess, and I wouldn't have guessed that. I would have.
Greg, prior to 2001.
Oh, geez. Yes.
The Northern Territory only had one seat. What was it called? What was it called? What was the seat? Knowing that around the nation we call our seats after historical leaders, after significant Aboriginal original language names. What was the original single seat of the Northern Territory called prior to 2001?
Wagga Wagga.
Correct.
Yes. Got it.
Very nice.
Yeah, look, what are they going to do? Are they going to paper, scissors, rock this bad boy?
Look, my thought is, see, you don't want to give up a seat if you've already got it. So there are two sort of.
I don't want to give up
there
this
are probably two opposing sides. Number one is, so on one side. While we've discussed in previous episodes the fact that gerrymandering hasn't happened to a tremendous degree in Australia in the past. Gerrymandering is essentially where you select an area based on socioeconomics, so you're more likely to elect one party over another.
Yes.
So we haven't had a huge amount of that in Australia in the past. Certainly not in recent history. What on one side of this, you've got the premise that these are two Labor parliamentarians, and we have the Liberal Party in charge of the country at the moment.
Yes.
So would they be inclined to save what is essentially and ostensibly a safe Labor seat? Or would they be inclined to reduce the number of seats altogether in that otherwise safe Labor seat area? So that's on one side. The other side of this is that once you already have representative parliamentarians serving, once you already have a representative seat in an area, those people are less likely to want to give that up, as well as you can expect that the more voices you have in a parliament, the greater amount of diversity, particularly in opinions. You are actually serving the parliament by bringing all of those diversity of opinions and thoughts and knowledge and constituents, et cetera, et cetera. So you've got that other side of potentially we want to keep this for the sake of diversity. But, there is the potential that the Electoral Act will be overturned, not overturned, but just amended.
Overthrown.
It's going to be overthrown.
There'll be a mutiny.
Yeah. Goodbye. There will. Let's just toss out all of the seats. No, it might be amended, and we might be able to reduce the threshold for seats for the Northern Territory, potentially also for Tasmania, who is one of the smaller ones as well. So yes. We'll just have to see. It is a wait and see situation.
I do love a good wait and see situation, Jake.
Yeah.
And speaking of waiting and
seeing, unless it's about my hair.
Now okay, our next little game here that I've got on the go, Jake, is a who said what game. I love these sorts of games, where we put two.
I like it. I got one of those too.
Do you? Well,
Yeah,
I've got
I do.
Hanson. I've got Hanson versus Scott Morrison, right? So Pauline Hanson
Oh, I
versus
love
Scott
it.
Morrison. So
gonna
who
be
said
great.
what? You ready? On the
Yes, ready.
Australian economy. We're going to ease our way into this, by the way. Like this is.
Yeah. Could you get a game show voice on, please?
And now we are going to figure out who said what. Was it Pauline Hanson or was it Scott Morrison? On the Australian economy, who said, I may be only a fish and chip shop lady, but some of these economists need to get their heads out of the textbooks and get a job in the real world. I would not even let one of them handle my grocery shopping. Who said that?
Scott Morrison.
Absolutely
the original
right.
fish and chip shop lady.
Absolutely. Yep. He's an everyday man, you know?
He is. And also an everyday woman.
Yeah. I mean, you know, that's the whole thing, isn't it? I mean, he doesn't want to label himself, so he's very progressive. Correct. All right. On Amazon operating in Australia. Are you ready? The second biggest company in the world, run by the richest man in the world, shouldn't get a leave pass from paying tax in Australia.
I think that legitimately was a leave pass. I mean, that does not sound like it would be in the lexicon of Pauline Hanson, but equally, it's not like Scott Morrison to specifically target countries or companies or industries. Ask them to pay tax. Yep. Okay. All right. I'm saying Pauline Hanson.
No, ScoMo.
Oh, really? Okay. That's interesting.
All right. On Australia's relationship with China. This is a nation where you have the freedom to follow any belief system you choose. I don't know. Apparently this is on religion. In Australia. Nothing to do with China. This is a nation where you have the freedom to follow any belief system you choose. Secularism is just one. It has no greater claim than any other in our society.
Oh, okay. So that was definitely Scott Morrison.
Yes, that was definitely Scott Morrison. Ding, ding, ding.
That was far too eloquent.
We need a ding, ding, ding.
The eloquence gave it away.
All right. We're not
ding,
saying
ding,
that Pauline Hanson isn't eloquent, right? Okay. It certainly comes to mind when I listen to her speak. Anyway, on the same-sex marriage debate. I
said an elephant.
On the same-sex...
this one's going to be difficult.
On the same-sex marriage debate. I understand the concern that Penny Wong is raising. I know it from personal experience, having been exposed to that sort of hatred and bigotry for the views I've taken from others who have a different view to me.
I love it.
That's a good one, isn't it?
That is
a good one.
That is delightful deflectionism from Australia's only red-headed senator.
No.
That has to be Pauline Hanson. Oh, my God! Oh, wow.
Now, these are fact-checked from our producer, Johnny. Just to be clear. They're not from Quora or Yahoo Answers. It's certainly they're certainly from I'm pretty sure they're from like the Australian or something like that. So they're authentic. They're authentic. Anyway, that was a bit of fun. I don't know which story that was for, Jake, but that was fun.
That was great.
I've highlighted it.
It's all right. I've got it. So this is from a story coming out this week in light of the Black Lives Matter movement protests being held all around the country and all around the world. Pauline Hanson has unleashed in the Senate after
I was imagining
the
dragons.
Morrison government moved to quash debate on her motion. She's unleashed on the Senate. Yes, she raised a motion that quote all lives matter, but it was very quickly quashed in the Senate. But yes, Senator Hanson has attacked the Black Lives Matter movement a number of times in the past, the latest being today's notice of motion. The Finance Minister, Matthias Cormann, moved to deny debate on the motion shortly after question time, and it follows controversy 2 years ago when he blamed an administration error, shortly after Scott Morrison came into the Prime Ministership, by the way, on the coalition backing her motion that it was, quote, okay to be white. Determined not to let that happen again, Senator Cormann moved today to ensure the motion, a reference to the Black Lives Matter movement protests, was not debated. Now,
I think that's good, hey? That's good news, isn't it?
I do. Well, yes. On so many different fronts, it is good. I mean, it represents a fact in Australia that we do have, so yes, it is great that it was quashed very quickly, because let's not give it airtime.
No.
It is also important to recognise that there is a portion of the Australian public who do think and feel like this, who are wrong. That's right.
No, I'm just kidding.
And whether I do have this thought occasionally. Is it better to let the debate happen in the public sphere and to let the people raise their claims and have them addressed head on?
Yeah.
Or is it better to just simply deny them the floor, to simply remove them the opportunity to go out and have their say? I honestly don't know what the right answer is, but I do feel a little bit conflicted sometimes when we think about, the fact that this person who does, like I've seen on my Facebook feed, people who I've worked with in the past, people who are, my neighbors, whatever, people who I know in my Facebook circle, whatever, who have said much the same as what she has said here.
Right.
And it is just one of those things that, I do legitimately wonder, should we let these debates play out, or should we just, acknowledge that now is not the time? Let's have those debates when it's less of a, powder keg type moment. I don't know. I don't know what the answer is. Greg, what do you think?
Well, look, I know what you're saying, right? There's obviously people out there who believe this sort of stuff, and it really fundamentally it just misses a point, right? And the key point being that they're not saying that all lives don't matter. They're saying that Black Lives Matter, and I suppose it's a phrase which sums up quite nicely the idea that that if you are born an Indigenous Australian, a First Nations person here in Australia, that you are more likely to suffer injustices. I mean, the statistics are quite clear on that. So to want to bring that up to speed, I think my views are probably summed up quite nicely by a comedian by the name of Michael Shea, and I was just looking him up to make sure I've got this right. But if you YouTube Michael Shea, Black Lives Matter, he basically says, look, it's a semantic argument for the stand-up comedian, and he says we're just starting we're starting the debate from the premise that Black Lives Matter. He's saying that is a controversial statement. To say that Black Lives Matter, and that's where we have to start the debate, just that they matter. Not even that they matter more, not that they, shouldn't matter, whatever it is, just that they matter. And that is it shouldn't be a controversial statement. And he goes on to make some pretty other interesting points. But that's pretty much my view. I mean, look, if you can't... I suppose it is a politically charged statement regardless, but at the same time, I mean, if we can agree that Black Lives Matter, then that's a good start, right? I just don't know about making that the actual point of argument. The point of argument needs to be, what are we doing to make sure that, these continued injustices stop happening? That's really where the debate needs to end up, not whether or not Black Lives Matter.
No, I tend to agree, and I think a lot of the commentary would agree with you in that
the commentariat.
The next steps. The commentariat. Yes, no, I think a lot of those next steps are really around, let's look into every single case of black incarceration. Let's look at every single case of black deaths in custody. We raised the statistics in last week's show around the 432 deaths in custody. Large portions of those were related to suicides. Well, nobody should be incarcerated and be forced to take their own life or, feel that there is no other option but to take their life. Let's look at that. Let's understand that. Why is it that for every 100,000 people, 1,000 Indigenous Australians are incarcerated compared with, I think it's less than 100 in the general population of Australians. So
Yeah.
let's look at that statistic and understand how that occurs. I do tend to agree with you. I do still struggle with that question of should we debate?
Yes.
Should we debate with the
Yeah,
diversity of opinions,
yeah.
or not? But
I'm not surprised. I'm not surprised that Pauline brought this up, right? And I kind of half get it, right? But it really is missing the point. And just to your point about looking into death in custody as well, we have to remember that we do have. I think there's like 100 and something recommendations in the Royal Commission into death in custody. So there are some very
less than
very
half
intelligent.
were adopted.
Yeah, and that's the
Less
thing, right?
than
That's
half were adopted, and it's
Exactly.
35 years ago.
Yeah, so it needs to be addressed. The idea that what action can we take? That action has been outlined in some of those recommendations. So I don't know. That should be the level of debate. I think, not whether or not Black Lives Matter or All Lives Matter. That's just such surface level rubbish. Let's actually have a debate about which recommendations were put in, which recommendations weren't put in, why they weren't put in, and can we refocus the debate around that, because it's not right. It's not right.
We're going nowhere. We're treading water. We're going nowhere fast.
Well,
Mine's
they did. I mean,
next, Greg.
I was reading an article in the Guardian this morning before the show, Jake, while I was eating my
Wheat Bix
porridge, and it said that it's in a lot of cases, some of the metrics that we use to measure deaths in custody and to measure how Indigenous people are treated in custody have gotten worse just over the last year alone. It's certainly a discussion that we need to keep having, and I'm glad we're having it. All right, Jake, your turn. Go. Shoot.
My turn.
I'm ready.
So
it's
time to play. No, I've got two more stories left, Greg.
Okay.
So we'll have a crack at those two. So the first one, Greg, China warned its citizens against blanking this week. The panel. I went straight to imaginary friendship. Greg.
Yes.
Why did I start the whole sentence again?
Go.
China.
Yes.
Warned its citizens against blanking this week. Greg, what did China warn its citizens against doing this week?
I'm going to say everything. They warned against everything except working.
Yep.
Except going to work.
Please go to work.
Don't think.
The poor citizens of Australia have empty shelves in Kmart. Okay.
Yeah,
we've just cut them off
really
for
their biggest
trade.
concern. Well, they can't do anything, can they? I mean, they can't play Animal Crossing. They're not allowed to play that. They can't play.
Yeah.
So they can't warn them against it because they're not allowed to do it. They're not allowed to protest. They're not allowed to play Animal Crossing. They're not allowed to use the internet. I don't know what happens over there. Are they allowed to use the internet?
They can do TikToks. Yeah. They're prolific TikTokers.
Look, is this the story? I'm not going to pretend for too long that I don't have some idea about this. Is this the story that they've been warned to not come to Australia because we're racist?
It is.
Now, look, this is. I'm just going to point something out here. I'm happy not to have a discussion about this, but it is a thought that I've had. All over the news, all over the world, we're being seen to have placards and protesting the fact that Australia is a racist country, right? I don't think we should be.
Are we?
Well, no, that's what the placards say, right? They say like we got to stop racism. We got to, we have systemic racism.
Oh yes,
okay,
I understand.
Right?
I understand.
Yeah.
Sorry.
So they're the images that are being posted up around the world.
Yes.
Should we then be surprised if a nation decides to tell their people maybe give Australia a miss because they're actually out in the streets protesting how racist they are? Like I said, I'm happy not to debate that. It's just a thought that I've had.
It's an interesting thought experiment. I really don't know the answer to that question. I think
we're not doing
broadly
ourselves
speaking,
a great image and maybe we deserve that image. But it's not. It's an interesting concept in the idea that I'm not too surprised that China has said maybe give Australia a bit of a miss when all over the news we're protesting about our own issues with racism. Anyway, it's just a thought that I've had that I'm sharing.
Yeah. No, look, you are so right. Certainly to some extent. I don't know what extent that is,
But
but
let's
it's
stick with
certainly
the facts.
well.
Let's go.
I suppose the other side of this, that we need to acknowledge is the fact that Australia does have an ongoing trade dispute with China.
Yeah.
And that essentially, in the lead up to the World Health Assembly vote on whether an inquiry should be held into how COVID-19 originated and spread, there were several threats being made by very senior party officials, both in China and representatives of China in Australia, saying, guys, if you push this button, we're going to push back and we will leave a bruise.
Yeah, it's a little bit immature.
So, I don't know if it is immature. I think it's a matter of trade with a superpower. If you piss off the superpower, expect to get pissed on, if you like. Hey.
Okay.
So, yes.
That's one way of putting it, Jake.
They need, piss off, piss on. Anyway, I don't know. Look, China.
We are live.
We are live, Jake. We are live. Jesus.
Okay. All right. So what's happened? Tell us. Let's stick with some facts here.
Well, China has warned students to reconsider travelling to Australia to study because of a string of incidents of discrimination targeting people of Asian descent. China's Ministry of Education said in a statement earlier this week that students preparing to study abroad should do a good risk assessment and, quote, exercise caution in choosing to go or return to Australia for study. Quote, during the pandemic, Australia has seen multiple incidents of discrimination targeting those of Asian descent. Now, the thing here is DFAT, the Department of Foreign Affairs and Trade, who do oversee a lot of the interactions with China, asked, and there were a number of education, particularly tertiary education bodies and advocacy groups in Australia who reached out to the Chinese ministries that were making these claims of these, quote, incidents of discrimination. And they said, provide us with the evidence, because if there is evidence of this discrimination taking place, we want to make sure that it's taken care of so that it never happens again. Okay. And we're not getting anything in return. So it does leave us with a without evidence that we're able to act on because of lack of evidence, unfortunately. So that is an actual issue here. We definitely heard about on the news in the lead up to the lockdowns of COVID-19, and certainly during the lockdowns, we did hear about a couple of occasions of one might say racist attacks. I would certainly say racist attacks on people of Asian descent. I suppose because I can only assume it's because the virus was, started in China, and the fact that I don't even know. I can't understand why somebody would attack somebody living in Australia. Anyway, I don't get it. But
no,
I'm not a racist.
Think that's the point, right? Yes. So that's the thing, right? It's about having that conversation and about exploring our own biases and all that sort of stuff. I mean, we're obviously not out there attacking people, and so it's hard to understand the level of hatred and bigotry that one can feel in order to go and do those actions. But
yes.
If we've got a history of even a few of those incidences, then China's going to use that against us, aren't they? Because that's what they do.
They are. And this actually happened a few years ago. We had a couple of cases of Indian students being beaten up. I believe it was in Victoria. There were a couple of Indian students who were just going about their business and were beaten up by a couple of groups of people. And quite rightly, the Indian government reacted furiously and suggested that all Indians or students of Indian descent in Australia should either seriously reconsider coming home,
Yeah.
or essentially figure out a way out. Figure out a way to integrate. But that was absolutely harrowing. It's just shocking to think that. I mean, surely, yes, people are capable of this sort of thing, but it's so nonsensical. I don't get it. I get it, but anyway,
and now it's having a
happened.
negative impact on a wider segment of our society as well. So we'll keep our eye on that one.
The biggest loser here, apart from Australia in general having the access to greater diversity in thought, opinion, etc., and ethnicities in our otherwise multicultural society, is the university sector, which is about to or already has released modelling claiming that it will lose up to $16 billion by 2023 due to the impact of COVID-19 and its access to international students. So that's massive, absolutely massive.
It is massive, and these discussions and this sort of attitudes shouldn't be getting to this point where it's impacting on universities or wider audience. I mean, it needs to be addressed at that local level, in the sense that those attitudes shouldn't be pervasive in our society at all.
Exactly. So, do we go to the final story of the week?
Absolutely, Jake. I'm ready.
Okay.
I'm ready.
Final story and final game of the week.
Okay.
So, Greg, this game is called Which Australian Prime Minister Said It? So the first quote.
Yes.
The first quote. Quote.
Wait, do I have to know Australian Prime Ministers?
The causes. Yes.
Are they?
But it's okay.
Are they like? It's not like number. It's not like the fourth Prime
Almost
Minister
all
Australia.
of them are recent history.
Okay.
No. It's definitely not the fourth Prime Minister of Australia.
Right. Okay.
But
it's not like a quote from Sir Edmund Barton
almost
or something.
all of them are in. Maybe. Anyway, quote, of the causes that quadrant has taken up that are close to my heart, none is more important than the role it played as counterforce to the black armband view of Australian history. Greg, who said that?
I don't know. Kevin Rudd.
The very last part of that sentence, the black armband view of Australian history. That's the classic quote from a very recent, very popular and long-serving Australian.
John Howard.
Yes, John Howard.
Yay.
It was John Howard. Well done.
I didn't need any clues.
Now, this next one.
Yep.
He was not a Prime Minister of Australia. What he was somebody who really, really hoped to be Prime Minister but couldn't get there.
Okay.
Quote, illiterate and innumerate refugees would take Australian jobs or languish on the dole and use free health services provided by Medicare. Who said that?
Anthony Albanese.
No.
Bill Shorten.
It was not Bill Shorten, no. No.
I'm just making fun
No,
of the
you're
fact
thinking on the wrong side of politics.
I know. That's what I'm.
That's funny.
Yeah, it was funny. Paul Keating.
He was a Prime Minister?
Was he? I don't know.
For some time.
I don't like this game anymore. I don't know.
He was pre-Howard, actually.
Was he? Yeah, of course. All right. I don't know. Who is it? Tell me. Put me out of my misery.
It was Peter Dutton.
Was it?
Mr. Potato Head. Yes.
Okay. All right. Yep. All right.
All right, here we go. You ready? Here we go.
Yeah, I'm ready.
Next
I'm
one.
limbered up.
Quote, power was needed so that the Commonwealth could regulate the affairs of the people of coloured or inferior races who are in the Commonwealth.
The Queen? Is that...
Oh.
Is that why you went British?
No. You did say his name a little bit earlier.
Did I?
You
Kevin
did.
Rudd.
No.
Julia Gillard. I don't know.
No. It was a relatively long time ago.
Paul Keating.
I'll give you a hint.
Yeah.
It is by many political scholars. This speech and the acts that were made soon after were, many people thought that this was the precursor. This speech and its actions were the precursor to the White Australia policy.
Gough Whitlam.
No. No, you said his name earlier. It was Australia's first Prime Minister.
Sir Edmund Barton.
Yes, it was Sir Edmund Barton.
Goodness me. We've moved on a little bit from there, haven't we?
We have a little bit anyway. The next quote. Who said this one? Quote, "My forefathers and foremothers were on the first and second fleets. It was a pretty brutal place, but there was no slavery in Australia."
I know this one. Kevin Rudd. No, it was ScoMo. That was ScoMo. That was Mr. Morrison.
It was
This week. Because
Scott Morrison. Yes, Prime Minister. It was.
Now, look, I've got to start with a confession. I didn't know about I didn't know about blackbirding or anything like that until the beginning of this week. I mean, I'm happy to admit my own ignorance there. I didn't know about those sorts of things. I'm not saying that he shouldn't have. I mean, it's a terrible thing that he said, and I'm glad that he's apologised for that and sort of because it was a pretty disappointing statement. But given our history and given the photographic evidence that we've seen, given the documentary evidence that we've heard, and also the just the harrowing stories that have come to light over the last week as well. So. It was certainly a mistake to say it. It was certainly a mistake to think it. It was certainly a mistake to deny our history in that sort of, I wouldn't say flippant, but, casual regard for our own history. Yeah. So tell us what happened, Jake. What's going on?
So, Prime Minister Scott Morrison has, as you say, come under fire for stating Australia's past is free of slavery before suggesting he always pushed for honest conversations regarding our history. So, discussing the Black Lives Matter protests and the colonisation of Australia during a radio interview earlier on in the week, Mr. Morrison said, quote, "My forefathers and foremothers were on the first and second fleets. It was a pretty brutal place, but there was no slavery in Australia." Quote, "I've always said we've got to be honest about our history. We've got to acknowledge the positive and the negative." Now, as you say, Greg, while the Prime Minister has apologised for the comments, many commentators have rebuked him and these sentiments, which, frankly, have always existed and regularly come up. So I thought we might examine some of the counterpoints. So Dr. Nareen Young of the UTS Jumbunna Institute said, quote, "He, or Mr. Morrison, thinks because Captain James Cook didn't want to involve his colony in the slave trade that there was no slavery, and this is frankly not true. Quote, "The existence of stolen wages has well been established." Quote, "Aboriginal people, they were working for indentured wages as labourers and domestic servants," she said. Mr. Morrison either needs to read some history books or talk to someone. So the thing here is First Nations people also experienced slavery in the cattle industry with employers buying and selling Aboriginal workers amongst each other. There were restrictions on their freedom of choice and movement. There was a cruel treatment and abuse, control of sexuality and forced labour, which is, frankly, the very definition of slavery. So it is well and long established that in Australia we did absolutely have slavery, and it was against our First Nations people.
Yeah, I mean, look, it's the argument needs to be that it's not even up for debate, really. I mean, it ends up being a question of semantics, and I just don't think it needs to boil down to that. I think if we just call it what it was and move on, I think that we get to. I think that the idea here is that Australia's going through a digging up process, aren't they? Like we're digging up old wounds and we're digging up, big chunks of our history that either we're deliberately denied or we're in denial about, right? Or that we just are ignorant about.
Yep.
The movement is serving its cause in that regard, in the sense that we need to heal as a country, and you can't heal unless you dig up all of that stuff, right? And we confront all of this, all of these terrible events that have happened in the past for us, events that, like I've said, I didn't even know about. That I'm spending a great deal of my time trying to teach myself about that at the moment, because I want to try and do my bit. And it's not a pleasant thing to do. It's not a pleasant thing to confront.
Well, I think no, absolutely.
And we have a lot of time throughout the year where we You go.
Sorry, I talked to you. Okay.
No. Yeah.
So, I think you're absolutely not alone. Issue here is that the Prime Minister, expressed that he is ignorant on a particular subject. It is